Hello and welcome to Innovating Pool Performance, the power of AquaStar's pipeline filter and NEW3 partnership. We have with us today Steve Barnes. He's Director of Science and Compliance for AquaStar Pool Products and a personal hero of mine for the last 25 years that I've been in the industry. I just learned that he's going to celebrate his 41st anniversary in March as an expert in pool equipment kind of throughout the industry. And today we're going to talk about a pipeline filter that can really change the energy usage of a pool. It's a pretty dramatic innovation. So without further ado, let's get started. Steve?
All right. Get my mouse in control. Here we go. Thank you, Scott. As he said, my name is Steve Barnes. I am the Director of Science and Compliance for AquaStar Pool Products. I started in the industry in the in-floor cleaning system in Scottsdale, Arizona in 1984 and as a research and development lab technician. So over probably the first 10 years as a tech, I was testing pumps and filters. I mean, when I started, most were bronze open-faced and were terrible for cleaning pools. And then they came out with all of the Whisper Flow came out in '89, and all kinds of the wild products that we know today came out through that period. And so I think the relevance of this is I've been dealing with the pumps and filters to a degree this whole time. I've always worked for major manufacturers. Technically, I've worked for the big three. Now I work for the new three, I guess. So over time, so that's a technical background. And Scott mentions that I have a lot of knowledge, which I won't argue with, but I am never done learning. This process that we're going through here today, we're still in the you're going to see a case study of actual pools. We're still learning. I'm still learning. We're still learning as a company. And in my opinion, we're still learning as an industry on how we can improve things. And that'll be a big part of that. So let's go ahead. And on the first part of this, most of this is going to deal with the pipeline filter and also some of the technical details about filters that I think are that apply to all manufacturers. Most manufacturers make a variety of different kinds of filters, DE, sand, cartridge, a variety of things. So these principles, a lot of what this presentation is going to be about is just how we rate filters and what that means to water quality. And so specifically, the pipeline filter achieves DE level water quality in a single element cartridge filter. I've got one here beside me. At one point, I'll show go into some of the details of that, some of the key features. And so one of those being is how the pipeline filter can reduce energy by up to 50% over as compared to most cartridge filters. I would say probably all sand filters, but not DE filters because they're really good at filtering, and I'll touch on that a little bit. And this just has to do with how good a filter is. When you combine a quality filter with proper sizing, properly programmed variable speed pump, those numbers jump to 90, and that's the case study I'm going to refer to. Again, while this is very dependent, to get to that 90%, you really have to have a high efficiency filter like DE, but then DE can be really hydraulically inefficient, so there's a trade-off there. But nonetheless, that's some of what we're going to get into. One of the key features relative to this is being about the pipeline filter is we're achieving the DE level, and I'll explain that, a DE level water quality without an additive. So there are some cartridge filters that get to these kinds of levels, but you have to add something like DE or an equivalent. It's in the manufacturer's instructions that everybody reads and follows. And so the anyway, so with this cartridge filter, and I'll show you, doesn't need any additives to achieve this water quality. That's important because there's less of a mess, less stuff to buy, and less to do. Um, and then another key element of this, by going to DE level water clarity, that means you're capturing everything going through the filter. It's not returning to the pool. We see with 5 turnover or uncertified filters where you look at a pool at night and you can see sort of the floaties in the water. DE pools and with the pipeline filter in a couple of days, you will not see those. Well, that means all that stuff's in the filter and creates back pressure. And the way we alleviate back pressure is, of course, cleaning or backwashing. And so if that's a 2-hour project and very difficult tools, assembly, got to figure out how to, like DE grids, putting them back together, different sizes. My parents had one of those. I was baffled forever on that kind of a thing. Um, you know, the focus of AquaStar's filter was to make it safe, but also make it easy to access so that people would clean it when it needs it, not just on a calendar schedule or once a week, once a year kind of a thing. So those are sort of, there's a lot more, and I have a one salesy slide on not that that wasn't salesy, but I do have one sort of sales sheet slide on the pipeline filter that I can tick off some of those highlights. But really, I think there's more useful stuff. Of course, we would love for you to try and use our pipeline filter, but there's really things in this presentation that will benefit all of our pool industry pros, pool owners, and everyone alike by applying some good quality principles to all filter technology. So with that introduction on where we're going to spend most of our time, I do want to tease that for those of you that were not in Dallas at the International Pool and Spa Deck Expo, sorry, Scott, we introduced the new 3, and this is a partnership between Poolside Tech and the Pool Attendant. Raypak and their, well, they make multiple heaters and hot water heaters. You maybe know them better as Ream. And then, of course, AquaStar. And we have partnered to basically fill out the pad with us 3 American-based, privately owned companies working together, not in, to bring new opportunities, and for sure safety in this filter behind me. You know, the NVIDIA heater and what Raypak does with heater safety. Poolside Tech has got all kinds of safety built into it, knowing that if valves are in the wrong place, that's a state-of-the-art control system. Efficiency, kind of, you combine all of these technologies together to come up with a pad that's, my opinion, best in class for efficiency. And innovation, you'll see, you know, these are award-winning products, and I got a little video showing of that. Multiple years where these products were are a national award winners, so we can say, look at that. It's not just our opinion. So with that, again, referencing that national show, this is those trophies we talked about. Raypak won it for the NVIDIA heater. Oh, I feel bad. They're going to hate me. And then AquaStar for the pipeline filter, I think 3 years in a row, Michael. And then this is the Poolside Attendant. And so we displayed all of this. And of course, AquaStar, we have the Pure Star ozone and valves and all kinds of other equipment. But the key is this partnership brings a full pad option to pool pros and anyone right from the get-go. I'll go into a little bit more detail at the end of that on some of how that might work. So, but first, let's talk about innovative pool performance, innovating pool performance. And this focus will be on water quality, the clarity of the water, and then for sure safety, of which getting the yuck out of the pool and capturing it in the filter, combined with a residual in the pool of the halogen. We typically use chlorine, but this is sort of a 3-legged stool associated with what keeps pools clean. And this is sort of the foundation of when we're going to do the deep dive into this filter and the NSF 50 standards. So what we know, there's basically, to maintain water quality, we need circulation, filtration, and chemistry. So if, hang on, I think I got a slide out of place. I do. I'll come back to that one. Okay, so specifically what we're going to look at is when you talk about the 3 elements for successful swimming pool, is we need a pump. Number one, if you don't have a pump, you basically, a pool without a pump is a pond. You can see it in the wild. You can see it in a backyard when the pump dies and somebody's on vacation or they can't get a replacement pump or whatever. So if you just leave water standing, it's going to turn into a pond. Now, the next thing is you need filtration. So you need all swimming pool filters are required to be certified to the NSF 50 standard. It's also the standard for our pumps and chlorinators and chemicals and all kinds of things. NSF 50 is sort of the equipment standard that relates to water quality for swimming pools. And so if you have a pool without a filter, it's still going to be a pond. But in effect, what happens is when we see literal ponds with pumps, the water's still brown or green or whatever color in whatever part of the world, country you're at. But the reality is what the pump will do, and we often see it with fountains in the middle of ponds, what that is doing is managing the algae growth. And so by moving water, you can prevent the slime, the deep, thick stuff on the surface. And just think about, hopefully you've all been out hiking at some point or another in your life, and you walk by a pond next to a creek. Same environment, same rainwater, same source water, yet that pond will be green, cloudy, or not cloudy, just dark probably. You might see, algae and growth around the edges, yet you go to the creek and it's clear. What's the difference? Is water is moving in one and not the other. So in the creek, our pump is gravity and downhill. And so that happens in nature. Now we add into the third element, which is pool chemistry. And without proper chemistry, we have a dangerous thing. That's the germs, the bugs, all the stuff that we share amongst each other. And before going back in history, which I talked in the last webinar a lot about the history of our codes and standards, that concept wasn't even understood. Well, I guess it was 1926, so we're almost within 100 years of really where society figured out swimming in people and environmental yuck can get people sick and die. And so we've learned the importance of the chemistry and all kinds of things. So the first pool standard in the pool industry, public pool, to my knowledge, was in New York in 1926. So 99 years ago is when this journey of modern pool equipment started in swimming pools. So we still have a lot to learn is the bottom line there. So the core of this, let me check. That pipeline salesy thing, I think I'm going to come back to later. So I'm going to continue. Sorry for my disorganization here. So let's focus. Let me go back to this one more time. So I'm going to focus on number 2, filtration. I think you're going to discover some new stuff here that was new to me within the last couple of years. So first of all, I mentioned that NSF filters need to be certified to NSF ANSI Canada 50. That's the standards referenced in the Model Aquatic Health Code, the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. You look at the PHTA ANSI standards, IATMO's pool code. Any of these, they are all going to reference the NSF 50 standard. So that's why we're going to focus on that in detail, because it regulates how these filters are produced. Now, one of the core elements of the NSF 50 standard is pressure safety, air relief valves, all kinds of things related to that, cleanability. that kind of thing. But really, why do we use filters is to clean up the water. And so the term for cloudy water is turbidity. And so what the NSF 50 standard requires is that every filter go through a turbidity reduction test, and that's comprised of water that's made cloudy with silica number 140. It's a product, you can look it up in the NSF standard and you can find it. It's basically silica sand from sort of sand in your hand all the way to just a fine powder. And when you mix that into, per the standard, mix that into the test tank that we're going to call our pool, then at that point, the turbidity level, it looks like milk is the way it's been described. I'm not seeing this test personally at NSF. I've seen a lot of them, but not this one. And so the turbidity starting point is it's called NTUs, is the units, like PSI is for pressure. So turbidity units are NTU, and that milky water in this case starts out at 41. And then the filter cannot be certified to this standard unless it removes 70% of the turbidity within 5 turnovers. And I'm going to come back to this in more detail. But this is what quantifies that a filter's a filter and not a pump or a skimmer basket. Okay, technically, a skimmer basket and a pump basket are filters, but they have very big openings, right? So we call them screens. And once you get into the filter itself, it makes a big difference on what the filter media is. And that's what this test is addressing. Another element of this that you won't be visible in the future is you see down below, it says allowable increase in head loss. And then down below it, actual increase in head loss 2. Those are percentages, as you can see to the right. And so after you go through this turbidity test and a filter is plugged up with the silica sand, and whoever's doing this NSF testing will backwash or clean the elements according to the manufacturer's instructions, and then they're going to run the head loss again, and it's allowed to. So let's say you take it up 10 psi, and then we backwash. Well, that filter can be certified as if after the backwash, it still stays at 5 psi. It doesn't even go back to 0. It doesn't have to under the standard. I think that's where some are not big fans of this NSF 50 test. Anybody who's familiar with Dr. Ambergy, who is with the CDC and is kind of the foremost expert on filtration, he really thinks we as a society ought to do something about this test. But for purposes of where we are now, just understand you can get a filter certified even though it takes 5 turnovers to clean to 70%. And you only, after backwashing, you only need to get 50% of that performance back. The pipeline filter, I think, is the class leader at 2%. So after we've loaded it up with all this stuff and then clean it, it recovered it came back, the pressure only went up in that 10 psi, 0.2 psi is all that it went up after cleaning. So I think that's one of the reasons this filter is so popular. It's easy to clean, and then it continues to work well after. So that's something I'm not going to go into the cleanability in the features of the pipeline, so I wanted to point it out here. Okay, so moving along. So this is looking at the statistical, and this, again, I learned from studying and attending Dr. Embergy's World Aquatic Health Conference presentations on this subject going back 10 years, 12 years, and then reading his research papers, and then also doing research as part of science compliance for AquaStar. So if we look here, the NSF 50 level 1 is if you turn over that pool one time and it removes at least 70%. It reduces the turbidity by 70%. Then that's its passing level. I think we could call that an L1. It's not a designation, but with flow meters and all test kit accuracy, all kinds of things at NSF, they label the top performers L1 down through. For flow meters, I think there's an L20 or something like that. So I just applied that concept to this. Now, by comparison, if we go up to the L0, because I didn't know what else to call it, that would be a 100% efficient filter, and they exist. They're called RO filters. The problem is if you have them under your sink or been around them, your faucet will run at 9 gallons a minute, and you're lucky if you can get a quart a minute out of an RO system because they so finely filter everything out. And for every gallon that we receive from RO, most systems you have to backwash that filter with 5 gallons. And then even at that, we have to replace them depending on how nasty your water is. You know, 3 times a year if you're in a really bad area, or maybe once a year. So the bottom line is the technology to filter 100% is there, but it's not practical in the pool industry. And so to be fair to Dr. Ambergy, he thinks that minimum L1 ought to move up to 70%. I wouldn't like that because we're not there. No, I'm just kidding. That's DE to get pre-coat. They're out there. But so L1 is the minimum at 70%. And then we have L2 would be turnovers to achieve 70. L3 would be 3 turnovers to achieve that 70%, so on and so forth. Now, the minimum down here in yellow, the L5, that efficiency, when you take 5 turnovers to achieve that 70%, means that filter is bypassing more than 70% of that silica, sand, and dust. Basically, the floating particles we see in the pools that are not chemically related to cloudiness. That's a different issue, but where it's just literally the stuff floating in the pool, where it's otherwise clear, that means it's bypassing nearly 80%. So now let's look at those implications. So if we take a pool, and the case study that I'll get into here in a little bit, was we looked at, it was set up to turn over the pool 1 time a day. And there's energy efficiency and stuff that I'll discuss on that. So if it was an RO system and you could magically or afford to turn it over once a day, you would get 99.9% of that turbidity out of the water in 1 turnover. So if we say 1 turnover a day with an L1 filter at the 70%, it's going to take 6 days to remove 99%. Okay, and those are really good filters. I think DE, nobody's really publishing the data, but my understanding is they're in the mid 90 percentile. So a day and a half, let's call it, with DE, versus classic, all other filters, if you will, good ones, would be 6 days. But let's go to that most common cartridge filter. Let's look at sand filters as we know them in the pool industry. They're all barely passing, is my understanding. Manufacturers don't like to admit it, but I might have worked for more than one. And so they're basically passing. It takes all 5 turns, and sometimes they have to do multiple revisions to their filters and grids to get them to pass. Some filters have taken years to get through this test, and then they're only at 21%, the bare minimum. Well, in this 1 turnover a day, that means stuff that lands in a pool today because of a dust storm in Arizona, it could take 29 days to get rid of all of it. And of course, there's more stuff coming in all the time. Yeah, Scott.
Just had an interesting question from Nicole. She's talking about the NSF test, and she's asking about what do they define as cleaning the filter? Are they just taking the cartridge out and spraying it off real quick, or or I mean, I'm sure that cleaning a filter, you could have, many different degrees of, when you're defining that. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, oh yeah, lived through
Oh,
it. So in essence, because this was a hard decision that I was sort of in charge of personally, is what we have to put in our instructions, how to clean it. And then NSF follows those instructions precisely. And then they have a tech who does it, and they have someone who watches them do it. And then they have an ISO certification group that makes sure they did it right. And then they audit themselves. And that's why it takes so long to get filters and anything else certified. It's important, but it's a pain. So the way to answer, and really good question, is if it's a sand filter and it says lift the lever and backwash for 1 minute, that's what they're going to do. If it says lift the lever and backwash until you can't see any brown in the water, that's what they're going to, I guess, in the silica, they would look for white. Okay. Others, like I mentioned, our filter doesn't use any kind of additive on it. There's, aluminum oxide. There's all kinds of, not oxide, that's deodorant, but there's all kinds of things that they add to filters to make they capture debris. And in some cases, you have to put a solution. So you take the cartridge and soak it in a solution. If that's what the instructions say, that's what you have to do. So after whatever those instructions say, in our case, it's just a garden hose, literally from 10 feet away. And then it says put a stream of water down each pleat and just go from top to bottom all the way around. Now you can do it side to side. There's lots of ways to achieve that, but we had to pick one. And that's where our data comes from. There are more effective ways of doing it with pressure and all that, but this one is what worked. It's reasonable. A homeowner can do it. That's why we picked it. So, and then now what they do is they go through that process. They reassemble the filter according to the instructions, and then they run the head loss curve again. So they run it at 20 gallons a minute, 40 gallons a minute, 50 gallon, whatever that, however many data points. I know valves, it's 10. I don't know how many it is for filters. But basically, after they reassemble it, then they run it. And then when they run that at its high speed, I guess it would be its operating flow rate, 150 in the case of pipeline filters. Then they look at that head loss, and it can't be more than 50% or less than 50% of the original, whichever that math works. So in our case, it was 2%. You're allowed to go all the way to 49.9, I guess, and still have a certified filter. Now, I actually have pictures, but they didn't make it into the presentation, of two RO cartridges. And actually, they're not. We just use it for pre-filters. So they would be probably, we'll call it an L1. And the way those cartridges work in the thread them in sort of canisters is they collect the debris in the fabric, okay? And they're real thick. And then they ultimately will plug up, just like an RO system. But there's no way to backwash them, so we throw them away and replace them. So every 5,000 gallons, we replace our fill water filters in the lab. That's what I have pictures of, but not in here. The reason I point this out is we can definitely get to really high turbidity reduction within very common filter media that's out there that our filter manufacturers make for RO and all that kind of thing. But the problem is you can't clean it. So it's a replace it kind of a scenario. So we don't use it in the pool industry. We could. I guess it would be a revenue service until they replaced your filter, but but anyway, so that's sort of the backstory on that. Long answer. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's good.
And you still have your hand up, so if you want to put it down, that way I'll know if you have
Oh, yeah.
It's like a regular Zoom meeting.
There we go.
Okay, so here's just a close-up where the level one, I'm just zooming in on for those people that have questioned, wow, it's not a 520 square foot filter, so the pipeline can't be as good. Well, here's the proof. So one turnover, we go from 41 to 11.4. That's the 72%. And then you can see, and this is the turbidity reduction, where we end up at 3.6 You can't, water's clear at 5, just to give you an idea. Well, I thought I saw you putting your hand up there, Scott.
I was going
So,
five turnovers. That
yeah.
was just
Yeah. So as soon as you pass the 70%, which we did in one turnover, DE does certainly in one turnover, but it would have an even lower that NTU value. So the pipeline filter, let's say it's not supposedly it was 11.4 after one turnover. What my understanding is DE would be down in that 4 to 5 range in one turnover. So there is a big difference with DE versus the pipeline filter. But when we look at the turnover, you know, within 2 or 3 days, you have DE level water with a pipeline filter versus in one day with a DE filter. And so we just think this is a very nice compromise and a lot less messy. So again, you've seen these before. These are the levels in the NSF standard. And so you can see we pass at 0.08% versus the minimum of 0.3 for what that's worth. Now, let's put this into comparison, if you will, or sort of what does this mean? So let's say the electrical cost is 15 cents per kilowatt hour, and filter A, which is a level 1 filter, turns over the pool in 2 hours. For whatever reason, we're going to operate them identically. So it takes 2 hours to achieve the 70% with filter A, which is L1, filter B being an L5, to get to that same clear water as measured during that filter testing. You're going to have to run that pump for 10 hours to get to the same level water of clarity. So you can see that's a big percentage increase. If we take that out to a month, and obviously we're running filters, well, that gets into the program I'm going to come up to next. So if we look at that over the course of a month, filter A is $9 a month total cost, and filter B would be $45 a month to achieve the same clarity based on identical test circumstances. So if somebody goes and dumps a bucket of silica sand in the pool and we want to get it all out. Okay. Now remember that there's 2 other elements. We need a pump and filtration and circulation. So we have to stir up the stuff in the pool. Otherwise, it's not going to get, we have to run the pump for one, because if the pump's not running, we're not going to filter anything. And if everything's settled out on the pool because we've turned the pump off for 18 hours or 16 hours a day, now the only way to get that silica off the floor of the pool is brush it, vacuum, or have an automatic cleaner or something like that. So this gets really complicated. This is just analyzing the filter itself. And so my challenge to you is for pool pros, what is the efficiency of the filters you're installing? Are you a $9 a month service provider or a $45 a month service provider? Or maybe you don't care because the customer's paying for it, right? It's their electric bill. So anyway, just that's kind of the philosophy we're looking at here. We think we can do better. So now I want to take on just a couple of minutes and go into some of the features. And I think, let me just look. I think my next after this. Yeah, after this, we will have the filter salesy bit kind of stuff. So this is the pipeline filter. This one happens to be 200 square foot. We have a 250 square foot. Not that the square footage matters because we're talking about performance. But that's how they're sort of, the industry knows them. That one's just 7 inches taller. It's the identical filter element. One of the key features of this, when we got into Ulof, the owner of AquaStar, came in and says, "Hey, I want to do a filter." And I was like, oh boy. Literally, that was, I sat quiet and then went around, oh, we can do all of these things. And they came around the room, how many want to do filter? and sales and engineering and everyone in the room, management, thumbs up, and I was a thumbs down. And the reason is because of safety. And I had just in 1989, when I was working for the in-floor cleaning system company, a homeowner was literally killed by a filter. So it split in half. It was a stainless steel. The problem is the bolt wasn't tightened. They were told, leave it alone, but the homeowner turned on the pump anyway, and it knocked her over into a block wall. We got called in. I came in to represent the company and had to go through that whole legal process. The filter lid ended up 3 backyards down. Without warning, lawyer says, here, review this, and here's all these pictures and things. And it's like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. But the bottom line, it was kind of a traumatic experience, and there's been lots of them. My understanding is there's like 3 a year fatalities on filters that are not properly maintained and secured and all of that. They all pass the NSF test to address these things, so it's human error is the problem. And that was my problem with us getting into it. And I'm like, it's just, for me, it's not worth it. And then after explaining that story in a lot more grisly detail, then basically the engineer says, well, we can fix that. And that solution comes in the form of this no tools, because that was the error point. They didn't use a wrench on it, right? So they didn't have the tool. They just hand tighten it. That was definitely not good enough. So the idea here is this has 2 handles. It takes 2 hands to open it. Let's see if I can do it without knocking this on the ground. I'm going to move it down. Sorry to face away. There we go. So this, it helps when you have it connected to pipe and plumbing. So, okay, let me go back. So 2 hands to unlock it. Then it comes around, it's decompressing the O-ring right now. So then when it comes around, you hear it click again. Well, it's locked, but this is completely free on top. So in this, if the pump was running or there was pressure, it's just going to relieve that pressure, and it's designed to literally blow down the outside of the filter. So you might have a bad day that it gets your tennis shoes wet, but it's not going to literally take your head off. And then to finish releasing, you have to unlock it one more time again to remove the human error factor, and it just comes off. Convenient is this spin, so you can always point the air bleed valve and the pressure gauge any direction you want. And then after that, it's very easy to get at the cartridge filter itself. Now, this is a proprietary design insofar as our filter element is really big and deep, okay? So we designed this entire filter specifically from a hydraulics point of view so that the water comes in from the bottom. It goes 360 degrees around the edge of this plate, because you can see this is solid. Water comes in out here by where I'm standing, but you see these little divots here? They not only center the filter inside of the pipeline housing, they create nozzles that spray the sand and silt and debris up the outside edges of this filter. So because this is such an important feature, I'm gonna unplug this camera and we're gonna go walk about. So if we look here, see this clearance? It's uniform all the way around. Oh, I'm gonna make everyone dizzy, including myself. So what happens is the water comes in from the bottom. It sprays all the way around. It goes up underneath the dome, and then it evenly coats let me put this back. It evenly coats the cartridge elements. And because they are spaced, we did not chase square footage. We could have easily put 300 square feet into this. It's real simple. All you have to do, let me move it closer. So if all you would have to do is just put more cloth into it. So we could create a Kleenex box and then try and filter through the edge of it and claim and match, 300 square foot or 320 or whatever. But that doesn't filter well. It just creates a lot of back pressure. We focused with the expertise of the people who make this. It's Pleatco Pinpoint. Okay, so they are the experts in that. We were the experts in the hydraulics, I would like to think. And so each one of these pleats inside and outside is usable surface area. And that's where we're able to get that turbidity reduction of 70%, 72% in one turnover, because we actually are capturing that silt throughout all of those pleats. So instead of them pleats like this, and it's only going to get stuck on your fingertips, they're open inside and out, if you will, so the water can come in and flow into the center. That's giving us our best in, not the very best, but one of the best hydraulically efficient cartridge filters. And by comparison, and this is NSF data, is this one out of the box compared to a 520 or any of those in that class, I'll use that one because I know the math, is 7 PSI less with brand new clean filters. So out of the box, if the other filter running at 100 gallons a minute or whatever that test is based on, that I don't remember, I think it's 150, it's at 10 psi. At that same 150, this filter will be at 3. So think about that from an energy efficiency. One, your pumps can run slower and it's quieter and saves energy. But also that means with this filter, you can go 7 psi of debris before you get to the brand new, much bigger one. So filter square footage just doesn't matter. And if I'm wrong relative to those other filters, they have the same test reports we do. And, they can share them, and then I'll stand corrected. I can only use what I know publicly. So we have the hydraulic benefit, we have the safety benefit, and the way the safety benefit works, I'll show it because people have these things. So if you look here, there's basically 2 sets of threads. One is plenty strong enough to go to 200 PSI is what this filter has been tested for. Then when you continue to raise it up, it's still got 100% of that 200 PSI strength, even though the O-ring has been disengaged. And that's where the safety of this comes from. Combined, giving you a little behind the scenes studio view here. So that's the sort of the key to the safety feature of it. It just some of the things that I want to I grab this one more time. So down here you see this interesting. Oh, it's zip tied down. But this tool comes with it because we advertise no tools required. And then we had a very astute service pro said, yeah, I need a wrench to open the drain plug. And Ulof, the owner, said, okay. And so now you get one of these fancy tools with every pipeline filter. So that's something that relative to what comes, some of the features is it's union. So it's either 2-inch or 2.5-inch. So it's a 2-inch slip or 2.5-inch that's included with this. Put this back up here. Some of the things obviously comes into the instructions and things like that. One of the things I would point out, it does have a huge high flow air relief valve, so that's quick and simple. The gauge is stainless steel. Ulof he's a tool maker, so he loves quality with a rubber boot. So we really didn't skimp on this kind of on that relative to again, state of the art or relative to, quality ribbed gaskets that self-capture so you don't lose them. But one of the other things I just want to briefly touch on, heads up that the O-ring ships in a separate bag so that it's lubed and clean and ready to go. That way, when you're installing the filter in that dirty environment, you can sort of get things up and running and done, and then when you're ready to start, you get a nice fresh O-ring to go with it. But one other thing that comes with our filters and our pumps, and this is a different story, but we really are advocates for safety and having fun around the pool. We have partnered with AquaStar's partnered with Every Child a Swimmer and Step Into the Swim. And so a portion of these sales revenues, this comes with it, and we encourage you to contractors to talk to pool owners about general safety, from VGB to CPR training, swimming lessons, fences, door chimes, supervision, some stuff like that. We're trying to be a good steward as a company. So we've just recently launched this, and we ship that with all of our products. Relative to the filter itself, it's got some more technical features. Let's see if there's anything in this next slide that will... I talked about the patented housing, 360 degree. I talked about the pleat spacing. The core does have... so this is it's a coreless element. Some filters you can buy them and they have a core, but why buy it every time when... for manufacture. So one of the things that improves that hydraulic efficiency is the core has 64% more opening compared to the legacy historical cartridge filters. So it's just not only easier for the water to go through the filter, it also means the dirt has more places to come behind it. So if you picture a core that's just got drilled holes, you'll see that the filter media is dirty right in front of them and not beside it, because there's nowhere for the dirt and water to go out. Little things, but that's, working with a very progressive engineering-based company, that's the kind of stuff we've looked at. So, okay, moving along, we've got a few minutes here. I want to get into this case study. Two different sizes. This is the PL 27,000, and you see we didn't use square footage. What we did is the 27,000 is this filter is NSF rated for a public pool up to 27,000 gallons. The bigger one is rated for a public pool up to 35,000 gallons. It's actually 35 and 9 or 700 or whatever. But so we named them after their public pool certification rate, because if it's good enough for a public pool, it's certainly good enough for a residential pool. But when and this is where I can't, let me see if I move this out of the way. I can't see the slide. So the residential, to use the residential capacity pool would be 72,000 gallons with the small one and 96,000 with the bigger one. And now let me move these back out of my way. So that's just a little detail, I think. And when we say DE level clarity claim back by NSF testing, that's that whole 70% thing I'm talking about. DE level, because DE, it passes in one, we pass in one. Arguably, as a code guy, I think we might want L1 to be 80 or 90, but oh, I just stepped in it right there, so I'm going to move on. Oh. Okay, so here is a demo of that filter function. So this is that filter in operation. This video doesn't show, but it was basically 2 PSI on that, and it was running like 60 gallons a minute. I'm going to be honest, I had to add a lot of extra silicone lubricant to the O-ring so that I was strong enough to do that. In fact, I'll go back one, and if you look close, you can see I'm sort of trying to keep a straight face while grinning to turn it. I tried to make it look easy. It's not that easy, but there's the safety functionality of this. So we're pretty proud of that. And that made it an easy yes when I saw this. And this is before we knew how good it was going to be hydraulically and the pleat co and all of that kind of stuff. So pretty cool. So anyway, there's that. So now I want to continue in this. I want to sort of talk about the NEW3 partnership, but this is still going to be Geeky Steve Deep relative to the kinds of savings. So as I said up front, and I won't reiterate, is we just view this as a really good partnership to give the pool industry more options. We're obviously, these are Pool Nation trophies. These companies are 3 times winners in these different product categories. And we're hugely supportive of what Pool Nation is doing, in addition to Genesis and Watershape University, talking about AquaStar, step into the swim, every child a swimmer. We try and be very proactive and engaged. Reason we are so engaged with Pool Nation is they are really trying to take pool service companies that start with no knowledge. It's an easy industry to get into, and elevate their basic level skills of chemistry and water and filters and wiring and connecting stuff and how to tear down heaters and that kind of thing, all to get functional employees that have hands-on ability, but also to prepare them for things like becoming CPOs, moving into the Genesis, Watershape, and all of that. So we at AquaStar, myself personally, think that what we're doing, be it Pool Nation and IPSA and others, where they're offering, and manufacturers, those are all good things that bring you up to a level of what you need to know as a pool pro. And then please continue into further education, because it's a great career. I've been doing it for 41 years, and I would encourage you to follow along. But so that's a little bit on the Pool Nation. But what I want to do is there's a lot coming. If you follow Raypak on social media, you can see that they're controlling our pumps and our valves and all kinds of new things. So there'll be sort of micro automation for replacement pads like you're going to see. And then all the way, we're partnered with the Poolside Tech, which is, I think, the undisputed technical leader. I mean, it is built on modern Internet of Things technology. It's truly as seamless in our phones as anything that you could find. I mean, even now washers and dryers and all kinds of appliances. But by comparison, what Poolside Tech is, it's state-of-the-art security. The engineers, because we are compatible, our pump is compatible with all the automation. He basically describes the classic legacy automation systems that were originally designed in the 90s as basically Morse code or smoke signals. I mean, you can control stuff if you're very handy with a light switch, 3 blinks and change colors and this kind of a thing. Whereas the Poolside Tech obviously has to support legacy stuff, but they're taking it to a whole new level where we're digitally talking to equipment, just like modern appliances are. So Poolside Tech, I think it's a huge home run. We're certainly seeing massive improvement in the legacy systems as they come out with new smart pumps and controls. And so again, I'm a fan of competition. I think it's matter, but we are not the automation subject matter experts. We are not the heater subject matter experts. So I'm thrilled that we partner with these companies. So now I'm going to jump into this cost case study. This in and of itself could be an hour or 2-hour presentation. So I'm just providing this information at a high level. The details are on the right, so this is all real data collected. So what I want to start with is we're going to start with a pad that had a 1 horsepower single speed pump on it, a modern one. And this is its pump curve, NSF50 pump curve, and then this is the red line is the head loss curve as measured in the backyard. So this pool is 19,400 gallons. The operating one turnover, it was at 42 gallons a minute. That means 1 turnover a day. I think the pool was running 8. 7.7. So you can see it's $3 a day or $1,300 a year for this old single speed pump that got replaced with a variable speed version of the same pump. Variable speed pumps are almost always more powerful than the single speeds they've replaced. And you can see that with the purple line. And so now what's happened is, because it's more powerful, it's running at 46 gallons a minute. But it increased the watts. It actually increased the power requirement by 18% because it's moving more water. Okay, so that replacement, my point is if you just do a like for like variable speed pump replacement and run it on high speed and treat it as a single speed pump that it replaced, you are costing more money. You're moving more water, you're filtering more water, but at the same time, a month after you replace that, 2 months at the max, you're going to have a pool owner going, what in the hell? Why did my electric bill go up 18%? That's happening day in, and that's a whole nother variable speed conversation. But now here, another thing, not all pumps are equal. And because this is AquaStar, the top line is the AquaStar pipeline pump that we replaced it. But this is without replacing any of the filter or any of that. So you can see it a more efficient modern, because the pipeline pump was designed after the federal rule. Ooh, sorry for hitting the microphone. We designed it to maximize efficiency. So it does better than this other one. Here, I'm just going to go through. Here is the equipment pad before retrofit. I tell you, we did not replace the heater. The heater stayed the same. Everything else we cut off at the ground and replaced it. So, and then here's what the new pad looks like. So it's 2-inch pipe before, and both were 2-inch pipe. It's 2-inch pipe to and from the pool, which is 10 feet away. It's not a big run. All the little pipes are the spa jets and stuff like that. But you can see this installer did a nice job of cleaning up the pad. If I go back to this one, you can see the pump's on the left. It goes all the way over to the right to the filter, and then back over to the heater, and then back to the distribution valve. So a lot of the percentage savings you're going to see here is just thinking through and doing a better pad install. And then we get the bonus. It's a more efficient pump. And then in this case, this 7 PSI more efficient filter. Okay, so here's what that replacement pad head loss curve looks like, the system curve. So now we're way more efficient because of this filter. So we're going to move a lot more water. So we went from 42 gallons a minute to 132. Now, if we stay at that and just run it the same, it's going to cost more money because it's filtering faster. So if you run it at high speed, but if we just reduce it to one, and if we just turn over the pool once in 2.5 hours, not an advocate of that. But if you did that, you could reduce their energy bill by 53%. But now the water's stagnant for 22 hours and algae can grow and skimmers are not working. So this is not the way to save money. What we want to do, and what we did, is match the flow rate of the original. And so once you do the before and after, 1 turnover a day, where's my summary slide? Here we go. So this is my second to last slide. So the original operating cost with that single speed pump turning over the pool once a day was $3. That's $95 a month, $1,300 a year. You saw that previously. After doing that pad upgrade and programming the pump to 1 turnover a day by slowing it way down, back down to that 42 gallons a minute, then the cost dropped to $17 or 17 cents from 3. That's down from 95 to 5. Cost per year is $62. The water quality is identical. It's a lot quieter backyard because we're running a very quiet variable speed pump at very low speed, and there's formula. That's a subject for a presentation in the future. How do we calculate all of that? And we could share those formulas. It's the law of serial dilution is part of it, and then also the pump affinity law. These are all things of physics. It's not math. It's math. It's not opinion. So huge opportunity with the pool industry to leverage variable speed pumps. They will all give you these kinds of savings when you take the time to do that. That's what's universal across all brands. And that's what AquaStar, the equipment pad, the hydraulics, and that's not even talking about our lifetime warranty 3-way valves and actuators and PureStar and chlorinators and drains and all of that stuff. But I think that's probably has a lot to do with why these other two really important companies have chosen to work with AquaStar, and I couldn't be more proud.
Steve, that I just learned a lot today. I wish we had more time. We
Sorry,
had
that's me.
a lot of great questions. I think we have time for one or two. A couple people mentioned uh, if you are just turning the pool over once, does that mean you've got dead water, dead flow? For pools that need kind of constant motion, especially like in hot weather, that you kind of need to keep things moving. I mean, how does that work? I guess.
So the way to handle it, and let me go back. If we look here, okay, if you run this new system, I think it's one more slide back. So if you run, I don't have an arrow at the intersect where the head loss curve hits the high speed. So one turnover is 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I'm saying you can do it and decrease your electric bill, but don't. What we want to do is run it. Now, I matched what we found with this pool. And that's the way we loved it because we knew it was working. We're doing research and all that. And we don't want to. It was a clean pool. This photo was taken before. It's a DE filter. This photo was taken before. And the water is just as clear now. So when we matched it, so now what we're doing is this is 7.7 hours. Okay, back to what it was really running. The way I recommend and what I teach in my hydraulics classes is to run 24 hours a day at an even lower flow rate. So you're spreading out that turnover throughout the day. When you do that, you're down to really low flows. So you kind of need to turn off the drains in order or up the speed so that your skimmers are working. But we're way better off to keep the skimmers working 24/7, like public pools. Go shocker, go figure. And then the other thing is by keeping water, and I'll wrap it up with this, by keeping the water running longer, 24 hours a day, 20 hours a day, or whatever, we have the chlorine or halogen in the pool will manage algae. But if you pause the pool for 16 hours, it gets completely still, and then the algae consumes the chlorine next to the wall. And now there's this boundary layer where algae is growing, even though you got 5 parts per million of chlorine out in the middle of the pool. If you just keep the pool moving like a creek, it'll be clearer. And that's one of the reasons.
I love that analogy. That is all we have time for today. I want to thank you, Steve, and everyone who came to the webinar and people who wrote questions. We'll get back to you individually. But we'll have to maybe do this again to cover some of the things that we didn't get to. But thanks for coming, everyone. The webinar is over, and we'll see you next time.